Welcome to Bits About Books, the home for conversations with authors of breakthrough books on sales, marketing, and business. Founders, entrepreneurs, and individual professionals, we all need to keep track of ideas that are helping create our today and tomorrow. Bits About Books will strive to find those books and speak to their authors, go behind the scenes and understand what inspired the authors to write the books that they did and how they went about doing so. Through our conversations, we hope to gain insights that will help us to get the most out of our efforts. I'm your host Shubhanjan Sarkar, founder of Pitchlink, the next generation buyer-seller engagement platform where our mission is to make buying easy.
Welcome to Bits About Books. Thank you for your time and for joining us in this session. I have a favor to ask. While you continue to listen to the podcast, please leave a comment or rating at iTunes or wherever else you get your podcasts from. I personally look at each comment and will give you a shout out to each of you in our following episodes. It means a lot to hear from you. Our guest today is Stu Heinecke, and we speak with him about his latest bestseller, How to Grow Your Business Like a Weed, a complete strategy for unstoppable growth.
If you just go out, let's say in your yard, and you decide, oh my gosh, there's a bunch of weeds over there, but that's okay. I'm going to mow the lawn, and they'll be gone. So you mow the lawn, and they're mowed down as well. Well, they just come right back. If you pull them, if root material is in the ground, they'll come right back. So they're really quite resilient, and they're obviously aggressive and persistent, and all these wonderful terms that we would love to apply and should apply to ourselves in business and to businesses themselves. Weeds it's their nature to do that. And so it's useful to look at their nature because that really needs to become our nature as business people.
Dubbed by the American Marketing Association the father of contact marketing, Stu Heinecke is a Wall Street Journal cartoonist, Hall of Fame nominated marketeer, and the best-selling author of How to Get a Meeting with Anyone and Get the Meeting. Stu is also the founder of cartoonists.org, a group of Wall Street Journal and New Yorker cartoonists who donate their art to help charities raise funds. Now, onto this brain-popping episode with Stu Heinecke. Stu, welcome back to Bits About Books. I'm delighted to have you back, and I'm so thankful that I know you and you so readily support what we do. I mean, I'm really, really thankful for that.
Oh, well, you're very welcome. I love what you're doing. I think it's very interesting. The Lit Fest was a lot of fun. And I love how you dig into, but you do it in an interesting way when you dig into various books that authors have written. So thank you for having me on the show.
Absolutely. This is a complete delight. And this book is, it's so unpredictable as an idea. It's intriguing to say the least.
It's not like the usual growth book, is it? No, it's not like the usual
Exactly.
growth book.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I would not have expected anything usual from you, to be honest.
I hope that's a good thing.
No, I mean it in a good way. I mean it in a good way. Because you think out of the box. And that's really what, when I think about you, I think about somebody who actually always thinks out of the box. And that's, think about the awards that you did with NASDAQ. Come on. It's out of the box.
Totally
it's way out there. So
it is fun to call people total weeds. It is fun to say, you're such a total weed. And then they're going, oh my God, thank you. Yeah.
Absolutely. So tell me, how did this come about? It is not a usual book. When I look at your previous book, Get a Meeting with Anybody, is How to Get a Meeting with Anyone, is not How to Grow Your Business Like a Weed. It's like way away from that if I wanted to think of it,
Right. That would be an odd thing to think that's the next book after getting meetings. But I think I'm a cartoonist as well. And I think like a cartoonist, I think. And so yes. I'm always looking for where's the cartoonists draw insights. They draw funny pictures, of course, but they're really drawing insights. And when we laugh at cartoons, we're always, actually when we're laughing at anything, we're usually saying, "Oh my God, that's so true," because that's the nature of humor. It's always about pulling out these nuggets of truth and showing showing the viewer these nuggets in a surprising way. But I guess that's why it's funny. It's that there's a surprise in there. It's told in a twist, but there's always truth behind it. So, so here the book, this latest book is that is How to Grow Your Business Like a Weed. I came about in a kind of an interesting way. I was first of all, we all know what it means to grow like a weed. I mean, that's just a universal thought around the world in every culture. We know what it means to grow like weeds because we could see them growing, and we're going, how do we get rid of these things? How do we control these? They're terrible to control in our yards, but they're really. I was saying, but the flip side of that is there's something really admirable about what they are and how they survive and how they act, how they grow against the odds that we put against them. And so I was driving down the freeway a long time ago in Los Angeles. I was driving down the Santa Monica freeway, and there are 6 lanes of traffic coming one way and 6 the other way, and about a 40-foot wide concrete median. So there's a lot of concrete, and it's no place for a plant to grow. And generally they don't grow there. But growing out of a crack in the concrete median was a dandelion that I spotted. And I'm just driving by really fast. So all these thoughts came really quickly, all at once. And I was thinking, well, look at that. I mean, it looked like it was happy. It was just those happy yellow flowers and the seed pods that the kids love to go and scatter seeds from. It just looked happy. It looked like it was happy running its process from that crack in the concrete. Then I thought, what an extraordinary thing. It made a living. The seed landed there in the crack in the sea of concrete, and it made, I guess we could say in a way, it made a living. It made its living there. And how did it pull that off? And then I was wondering, there's all of this again in just a very quick split second moment of time. That then I was wondering, well, what makes them so special? Why do weeds do that, but no other? We don't see oak trees growing out of cracks in concrete medians in the freeway, or petunias or rose bushes or any other, let's say, more polite plants. It's just these aggressive little weeds that pull it off. So what is it about them that makes them so special that they can do these things that other plants can't? And I wondered, do they have a model? Do they all adhere to a unified model? Is there something about what they do that all weeds do? And I realized, yes, they do have a model, and it's not only is it applicable to our business, to our businesses, I think it's actually the theory of everything about growing anything. So that's where it came from, and that's the original thought. That's where it came from.
I can see the idea germinating in your mind, and then you decided that this could make a great book, or this is a book I want to write. What did you do after that?
How did the freeway incident turn into a book? Yes, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that was one pathway.
Exactly.
And before it became a book idea, we just, again, that split second, I was just thinking, God, I really want to live up to that example in my own business. So then I sped away. That was the end of the encounter. But I really wanted to live up to it. And so I've been very curious about, well, how do you do that? How do you grow like a weed? How do you make whatever it is you're doing grow like a weed? And then there it had been a book idea for quite a long time. I just ruminated. I just thought that's one book I would really love to write, is how to capture the essence of weeds that makes them grow. It's that incredible essence, and put it to work in our businesses. So how do we do that? And what kind of a book would it be? And so for a long time, I just sat in that space. 20 or 30 years, it sat in that space in my head. And then How to Get a Meeting with Anyone came out, did well. And I thought, the next book I'd really love to write, that book about the weeds. And the making of the book was really a blast. It was very interesting. Of course, there's no blueprint for this. Nobody has written about weeds as a growth agent. So there's nothing you can read in literature about. I mean, you can't even find quotes actually about weeds being great metaphors for growth. I mean, other than we know what it means to grow like a weed. There's a quote that is told in churches, I guess, a lot, church service about blooming where you are. or blooming where you find. I forget exactly what the quote is, but basically it's bloom where you are. And that's a great quote because that's exactly what weeds do. They make the best of wherever they are, whatever their circumstances are. They're ready to take it on and adapt to it and make it work. So that's a wonderful, but there was nothing in the literature. So, okay, well, I kind of like those circumstances. You get to discover the whole thing. And so I did, but I thought, well, who do I talk to? How do I get more information? How do I research this? And so I started my first two interviews are a great way to research anything, I think. So my first two interviews were, well, the first one was with a master gardener. I just needed to know, what are weeds? Like, what makes a plant a weed? Is it a species? A subspecies of plants, or is it all across species? And so I needed to know, what is a weed? What actually makes a weed a weed? And then the second one was with T. Boone Pickens. I don't know if you remember him or not, but in the 80s and 90s, he was all over the news. He was everywhere. He was on the cover of Time Inc. Time Magazine and newspapers. And because this is what he was this really interesting character. He was in the oil business, and he realized that, I could keep drilling for oil and finding or exploring for oil and coming up with a lot of dry wells before I find any producing wells, or because oil companies are they're valued based on their reserves. So those are the reserves in the ground. Those are the wells that they found that they can pump. And he realized, I could keep doing that, or I could just I could just buy other oil companies, and that would increase I'd just be then buying known producing wells that way. And so, he made a run at one company, and it was, I think, 28 times the size of his own. But he got some investors together and said, well, this is what we need to do. And they did it, and they pulled it off. And and that company first, they approached them first and said, we'd like to buy you. We'd like to acquire your company. And they're just saying, no way. But they were a publicly traded stock. So they just bought the stock. They just went so he became one of the original corporate raiders. That's really what he was. He was a pirate, and in a good way, but he was kind of a pirate character in the news anyway, because here's this guy, this brash guy who's going out, he's trying to buy Phillips Petroleum and Occidental Petroleum and so on, all these big oil companies. Who is this guy? And I'm sure that the people in the boardrooms of these companies are thinking, my God, this guy's just such a total weed, right? Because he just keeps coming. And so he was a really interesting, he became a billionaire because of all this. So he was an interesting person to talk to about, well, what does it take to grow? And in fact, what does it take to grow like a weed? You did grow like a weed. So what does it take? And so that ended up being sort of the two factions in my interviews. Some were scientific. I needed to know about weeds. I discovered there's actually a specialty of weed scientists. I didn't know this, but yeah, there are weed scientists, and their mission is to help agriculture defeat the weeds, but they have to understand the weeds. So they do a lot of study of weeds.
Right.
And they know all about what these weeds, how these weeds grow, and how they pull off what they pull off. And they were fascinating to talk to, because you listen to it and you think, well, okay, this is going to be interesting if you apply this to business. This really makes sense. And so then the other faction was a lot of really, I would call them interesting, fascinating personalities within business who've done extraordinary things. But it wasn't just that. I was also talking to military leaders, because, maybe some of that strategy also shows up in war doctrine, perhaps. And then also I interviewed the former director of the CIA, and a couple of 4-star generals. And I was just looking for where do I need to look to find the insights I need to write this book and make a cogent argument about we should be looking to weeds, not only to just say, man, it would be great to grow like a weed, but to say, how are they doing this? And how do we systematize that to make it a model that I can use in my business?
So obviously, these first two interviews were critical, and then you went out and you sort of had ideas to talk to more people, like the generals and the ex director of CIA, etc. So at some point, it started sort of taking shape in terms of how this book is going to be, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So when did you actually sort of uh, put the structure out? How long did it take you after you started doing those two interviews? How long after you actually had a structure out that, okay, these are the three major sections and this is how I'm going to break it down?
Well, I didn't want to. I didn't want to have conceived notions of what the structure of the book might be before talking to these people. So I had a lot of interviews first, but as I'm going through the interview process, it just starts to crystallize in your mind that okay, I see it. It's there. There seem to be four elements to this, and so one is mindset. Another one is I guess you could call it collaboration. I guess weeds never show up alone, so they derive a lot of their power because if you see, for example, if you see a dandelion in your lawn, just one, look up and you'll see dozens, if not hundreds of them, and then they pump out a lot of seeds. They're not going away. You'll never get rid of them. But if it was just one showing up alone, not much of a factor. You just pluck it out and you're done. You wouldn't even think about it. And so they, and that's what they do. They leverage a fierce mindset and unfair advantages. That'd be another one, actually, that they're always applying unfair advantages. Look at, we'll talk about this more in our discussion, but whatever they do, they always do with an unfair advantage. And we should do that in business. Certainly we should be doing this in business. There are a lot of businesses that don't have them. And so and then, as I mentioned, then they're collaborators. One of the great collaborative forces in nature is how weeds work together. They're swarms. They're not just individual plants. And there's a power in being a swarm or creating a swarm around whatever it is that you're trying to grow. And then finally, they run it according to a process. So this process is honed. It's this repository of this is the stuff that has worked the best over not millennia, but millions, actually tens of millions of years. So their process is incredible. I really would say, and it's really, it's baked, literally it's baked into their DNA. And really what it is it's their evolution. So you can see instances of weeds evolving around certain challenges. And when they've done that, then it's evolution. It becomes the new version of the plant. So there's some really interesting stories about how weeds have evolved around, let's say, pesticides, so that they've just rendered them useless, and that becomes the new, I don't know, the new feature of the plant is that it has evolved this immunity to Roundup or glyphosate. So it's really interesting how they do it. But those things just emerge because they emerge as a result, I should say, of talking to all of these sources. And then there were some interesting books I also read. There was one, I can't remember the name of it. Really interesting books. One of them was about the forest and how the trees actually communicate. They're actually communicating. They have a different way of communicating, but they're more than just, we can look at plants and say, yeah, they're alive. They don't move though. They don't seem alive in a lot of ways, but they do communicate. And then another one, this big encyclopedic book called The Worst Weeds in the World, or The World's Worst Weeds, sorry. And it was this encyclopedia, literally, of all the weeds that are found around the world. There are a lot of them, and how they proliferate, and what do they do, and what kinds of, well, I called it unfair advantages earlier, but what kinds of properties do they have? Are they thorny? Are they toxic? Or there are all kinds of ways that weeds formulate these unfair advantages that allow them to dominate their space.
So how long did it take you to actually write it down? I mean, to put it together?
Well, probably a couple of years. I'm trying to remember now. I mean, the thing is, right. I should say the book started when I drove down the Santa Monica Freeway that day a long time ago. But the writing, I would say probably 2 years, writing and editing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. It was not like in one go we have done it over like a couple of weeks period. It's
Oh
it's it's,
God,
it's
no,
much more than that.
no. Yeah, a lot more than that. It takes a lot
Yeah,
of.
yeah,
I think it just takes a lot of
yeah,
time to assimilate everything you've pulled in from all these
yeah,
research sources to understand what's the picture here.
yeah, yeah. So let's dive into the book now. I think we are ready to dive into the book. You decided that this will be basically three, rather four broad sections, right? So
Well,
the nature of weeds, the weed mindset. Yeah,
yeah. So the nature of weeds is about what are they? Because remember that's the question I started with. What is a weed? What makes a weed a weed? And it turns out, by the way, weed is just sort of a pejorative term we all use to describe plants that are, I guess, that don't hew to our expectations, or they don't hew to our physical pens where we in our gardens, for example, they don't stay there. Some weed species have been imported as because there are beautiful weeds. There are a lot of they're plants, so some of them are quite attractive, and they had been imported. The Japanese knotweed is one of them. It had been imported from, I guess, Japan, obviously, and then they soon discovered that this plant has these roots and runners from hell, and you'll never get rid of it. Not only that, it'll just spread and spread and spread. It actually spreads underneath roads and underneath. I mean, so these roots will run underneath a road or underneath even buildings to proliferate even further. And here's the really pernicious thing about the Japanese knotweed. If you decide, okay, I'm going to get rid of this, well, there are all these little bits in the ground. If you pull them out, there are little bits of root in the ground. But if you just took the plant material and ground it up and said, okay, I'm done, you're not done, because every little shred of that plant that comes in contact with the ground then becomes a new instance of the plant. They don't need seeds to do this. It's just, it's a weed from hell. But anyway, so that was the first part. Just what makes a weed a weed, and why do we call them weeds? Or just what are they doing? Why do they? What do they have a mindset? What's going on? How is it that there is an apparent mindset, isn't there? Because if you just go out, let's say in your yard, and you decide, oh my gosh, there's a bunch of weeds over there, but that's okay. I'm going to mow the lawn, and they'll be gone. So you mow the lawn, and they're mowed down as well. Well, they just come right back. If you pull them, if root material is in the ground, they'll come right back. So they're really quite resilient, and they're obviously aggressive and persistent, and all these wonderful terms that we would love to apply and should apply to ourselves in business and to businesses themselves. Weeds it's their nature to do that. And so it's useful to look at their nature, because that really needs to become our nature as business people.
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there are two. So the two key words you used, persistence and resilience. I think both are extremely important for anybody who is trying to build a business, right?
Yeah, well, and there are more. I mean, it's aggressive and persistent. I mentioned persistent, but it's aggressive and urgent and adaptive is another one. Probably the biggest one is collaborative. That's all part of their
Yeah.
mindset.
Yeah.
The thing I was going to say though is that because when you mow them or pull them up and they keep coming right back, there is, even though they don't have brains, there's an apparent mindset, isn't there? Because they don't give up. They just don't give up. They just keep running their process. And I doubt they get depressed. I don't know. I don't think they have emotions, but I doubt they get depressed. If they did, they just mow right past. They just go right past it. They just keep
Yeah.
coming. And God, isn't that how that's how we should be in business?
I couldn't agree more.
It's time for a short break. Stay with us. After the break,
If you think about, let's say, one of the largest plant species, maybe it is the largest plant species, is the sequoia tree. And you look at the range of a sequoia tree versus the range of the dandelion, there's no comparison. The sequoias survive in this little tiny pocket near Fresno. That's it, and they've not spread anywhere. And of course, dandelions are on 6 continents. They're not no weeds survive on Antarctica, but they're on 6 continents. They're everywhere. So how do they do it? Well, a lot of it had to do with just that unfair advantage of how they spread their seeds and probe every possible opportunity to take root. That's incredible.
You are listening to a Business Podcast Network original. Podcasting is the fastest growing content marketing opportunity which is untapped. We can help you craft your audio strategy and help leverage the wide reach and easy streaming capability that the smartphone penetration provides. It is easy, it is powerful and personal. Talk to us to find out how podcasting can help you build your brand and reach out to your targets like never before. Write to us at bpn@bizcast.in. That is bpn@bizcast.in. Business Podcast Network. Podcasts end to end.
Welcome back. I'm Shubhanjan Sarkar, your host for Bits About Books and founder of PitchLink, the buyer-seller engagement platform. Let's dive right back into the episode where we left it. So when you talk about the mindset and you expand on the mindset ideas, so is it this set of attributes, or are you talking of completely different ideas? I mean, from the chapters, I can see that you're talking of ruthlessness, for example.
Well, I think it was ruthless aggression, something like that.
Ruthless persistence.
Persistence. There we go.
Ruthless persistence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So persistence and aggression, urgency, adaptability, resilience, those are all attributes of mindset, of the mindset of a weed. And so, yeah, that was the first section, really. But we need the mindset of a weed to thrive like a weed. Otherwise, it doesn't happen. I mean, all of these things start in our heads. We either win or lose based on what's going on in our heads first. So we've got to sort that out. You've got to have this tough weed-like mindset. And then there are following sections. So the next section in the book was about unfair advantages. Those are really interesting. I mentioned dandelions, and so think about what dandelions do. They have those seeds that fly all over the place, right? So, and they've got the seed pods, the geodesic spheres of seeds that's their launch pad, and they fly around, and they can fly for miles, and they probe every possible opportunity to take root. That's how that dandelion ended up in the crack in the concrete. They probe everything, everywhere. Well, that's so unlike what, let's say, a pine tree does, or an oak tree that drops acorns. They don't. Well, I guess animals will. They probably count on animals to move them around, but they don't move very far.
Yeah.
If you think about, let's say, one of the largest plant species, maybe it is the largest plant species, is the sequoia tree, and you look at the range of a sequoia tree versus the range of the dandelion. There's no comparison. The sequoias survive in this little tiny pocket near Fresno. That's it, and they've not spread anywhere. And of course, dandelions are on 6 continents. They're not no weeds survive on Antarctica, but they're on 6 continents. They're everywhere. So how do they do it? Well, a lot of it had to do with just that unfair advantage of how they spread their seeds and probe every possible opportunity to take root. That's incredible. But there are a lot of other unfair advantages that weeds carry into the field, and another one would be thorns. I mean, and that's just obviously sort of area denial. Or area or access denial. When an animal or a human comes in contact with let's say a blackberry bush, and they get pricked by those thorns, they're only going to do that once or twice before they realize, no, that doesn't work. I can't. Oh, that hurts. I'm going to stay out of there. And that's exactly what the weeds want. They've taken over that turf and they're defending it. And there are several. Actually, I listed 8 levels of strategy that inform unfair advantages. And I guess the other thing, maybe the last thing I'd like to say about unfair advantages, is that we could see examples of businesses that are trying to make it, but without unfair advantages. And I don't know if anything comes to your mind, but I live on an island in the Pacific Northwest, and in the little central village of our town, it's kind of a touristy town. It's built on a cliff over the water. It's a really pretty spot, and so there are these shops that sell touristy knickknacks. I guess they're just little souvenirs, I suppose, or something like that, here's even worse ones. They might be selling soaps and incense and oils or something like that. Nobody needs this stuff. It's a very, very limited market. If any disruption happens to that market, you're dead as a business. The business is dead because there's no unfair advantage to that at all. Then we could see other examples of companies that have all kinds of great unfair advantages. And I'm just racking my head right now to think, okay, let's say SpaceX, really interesting example. They developed that Falcon booster system, and as they were doing it, everyone thought they were crazy. I mean, we just thought, well, nice idea to have a rocket booster go up and then come back down and land propulsively, like in science fiction movies, but it's never been done before, and it doesn't seem like SpaceX. Well, Elon, he seems to be able to pull off anything, but doesn't look very probable. And sure enough, the first prototypes would go up and they'd explode, or they'd explode on the pad. They'd come down and explode. And they were also trying to land on drones. Drone ships, obviously, as well, because they do that now. And then when they first stuck a landing, we're saying, well, that was just astonishing. Wow. They actually pulled that off. And I think from that point on, pretty much they stuck every landing. And now it's just routine that these boosters go up and they come back down and they land propulsively. And what that means is that each of those boosters gets to be used. I don't know what their record is now. The last I looked, it was something like 11 times, as opposed to any other space agency, or organization that would launch a rocket for single use. It's a very, very expensive way to put payloads into space. And so SpaceX was able to undercut that price by a tremendous amount because they were reusing their spaceships. It's amazing. So that's an unfair advantage that still exists. I don't know if anybody's actually, I'm trying to think. I don't think anybody's even matched it. China is trying to. I don't know that they've succeeded. I don't think anyone has matched it yet. So that's a great example of an unfair advantage. It's, by unfair, I mean, it's not really unfair that Elon worked that out. He just explored and found a way to make it work. That's not unfair. It's great for the marketplace. It means it means that cargo can get up to space at a cheaper rate. But the competitors are, I'm thinking I'm describing the reaction that your competitors will have to your advantage that you build, and they'll be saying, how are we supposed to compete with this? I mean, how does that work? How are we going to do this? And so that's what I mean about unfair advantage. It's not unfair. It's just the way that competitors will view it.
Do you see application of this so one way you can have unfair advantage is through innovation, right? So you invent something which is not there.
Yeah.
So that's, so in your example with SpaceX, it's pretty much that you invented a way by which the capsule can come back and you can reuse it, or the booster can come back and you can reuse it. Do you see any other examples upfront in your mind where smaller companies have been able to achieve that?
Yeah, I think location plays a big role. If it's a brick and mortar store, for example, or business, location, we can see that. We've seen it our whole lives, how locations can change the fortunes of these businesses, and you can see that in extreme with a company like Starbucks. And Starbucks, they're just everywhere, and their part of their philosophy has been to make sure that there's always a Starbucks nearby, and it's always a right-hand turn from the road. So that is driving in U.S. custom, where we drive on the on that side of the road, but it's always just this easy turn off the road, as opposed to having to take a left-hand turn through all the traffic. And so even that's an unfair advantage. So other coffee stands can't. I mean, they just don't have the marketing push or the size. It's really, actually, you could see though that they're also acting like weeds because there's a lot of them too. They're everywhere. It's very easy to patronize Starbucks because they're everywhere.
Right. So you basically have broken this up, the weeds model, into seed pod, thorn, segmentation, rosette, vine, and root strategies, right?
Right.
And soil. These
right.
These are the eight. So unfair
So those,
advantages that you talk of.
yeah, and so those are the 8 levels of strategy that produce unfair advantages. And so when you read through that section of the book, you'll
Right.
find that seed strategy is about seeds are analogous to anything that causes people to become aware of us and form the intent to transact with us in some way. Just like seeds do out there in nature, they spread around and they open up new possibilities for the plant to spread its range. And so these are things like um, people talking about us, advertising, marketing, all those are seeds. Anything that puts something out, that some impetus out there
Right.
for people to, a stimulus, I should say, for people to respond to. So social media is also seeds. All of those impressions are seeds, and we want to maximize those. We want to make sure they're the right impressions, I suppose, but we want to maximize those. And then it goes all the way down sort of the body of a weed. So it's the seeds, and then the seed pod. Seed pods are multipliers of the effects of those seeds. So what can we do to? I think maybe one of the great multipliers is maybe what we're doing right now. You have an audience that I don't have, so your audience is different from mine, and so we're cross pollinating in a way. Our audience is this way. I'll be introduced to your audience. You will be introduced to mine because they'll want to know what we talked about, and so those kinds of things are seed pods to multiply the effect of the seeds, and that goes all the way down the body of the plants. The roots are where the life force of the plant is generally resides. And so, for example, if you pull a dandelion up, but you don't get the root, the dandelion plant will the part that's above the ground will come back. So it's the life force of the business. What is it that it's just the assets and the IP and so forth of the business, and maximizing the value of that IP and those assets. And even soil. You mentioned soil, and soil is an interesting one because we find ourselves in various environments or substrates just the way weeds do. And they seem to have this huge tolerance for all kinds of conditions. I've had dandelions. I found dandelions growing up in the gutter in my roof. There's no soil there. I don't even know how it happened. But anyway, they'll take root there. Even they just they're very, very adaptive, and they'll just whatever soil conditions they find, they'll just find a way to thrive in it. But for us, for businesses, we can find ways to change those soil conditions by creating movements or tying to movements and so forth. We do have a chance to change the substrate in which we grow our businesses, and so it discusses that as well. So there's a whole range of strategies and frameworks for producing unfair advantages for your business.
Before we move on to the last segment, which is scaling like a weed, touch upon what do you talk about when you're talking about thorns as well as rosette?
Sure. Well, thorns, as I just described earlier, are those sharp little pins, those pricks that stick out from plants. That
Right.
And if you get near the plant, you get scraped by them pretty easily. You learn, well, okay, I'm not going there. Well, we should do that in business as well. And the thorns that we can produce are the things that protect our IP, I would say mostly. But pardon me, patents and let me start that again. Patents and agreements, non-disclosure agreements, et cetera, put some teeth into, or really some thorns into what it is we're doing out there in business, so that people don't ride all over us. If you don't protect your intellectual property, people will steal it. It's very easy to steal otherwise. We're seeing that even more in the age of AI, because if your content is just public, if it's been published anywhere publicly, ChatGPT, all these different large language models can reach right into that and use it. So you have to protect that IP, or everything you've done, all of the advantage that you've built through your hard work will erode. And that's the function of thorn strategies. And you mentioned also rosettes. Rosettes are those, well, again, I'm going to go back to dandelion. Rosettes are those that radial fan of leaves that that a dandelion puts out, they don't grow. The leaves don't grow up this way. They flatten down on the ground and they grow in this sort of radial fan, and eventually those radial fans become quite thick. And if you pull that dandelion up after it's gotten thick, and it's in your lawn, you'll notice then that you might have a 10-inch hole in your lawn because nothing can grow underneath them. They have just dominated that space so much so that the plants there and immediately below that fan are not receiving sunlight or water. They can't grow in those conditions. And so we look for ways to dominate our specialty or our category if it's not local, or locally just to dominate our local market. How can we do that so that nobody even considers doing business with your competitors?
Right, right. So moving on to the last section, scaling. I mean, growing like a weed is essentially about scaling.
Yeah.
I mean, how can you have this abundant kind of growth, abundant kind of presence? So in terms of mind share as well as in terms of business, in terms of access to market and so on. What kind of lessons are we talking of here? You're talking of 1:1 leverage, multi-channel, and collective scale, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, so I think if the weeds could speak to us, and they don't, or they're speaking through me, perhaps, I don't know. But if weeds could speak to us, I think one of the things they would say is, look, if you want to grow your business, you should be teaming up with the smartest people you know as fast as you can and create new collaborations. And so, and it's true, it's a great way to think about the nature of that in business. If you're starting to collaborate with people who have, let's say, have different audiences or a different group of clients, et cetera, well, you become introduced to their client, they become introduced to yours as well. But if you're doing something complementary, you're not necessarily, you shouldn't be direct competitors. That won't work. But if you do something that's complementary, then everybody wins. They learn everyone who's in those two bases of clients gets to meet a new and maybe use a new source for some new maybe some new competitive advantage in their businesses, some services that'll help them, and they're coming these introductions are coming from a known source, a trusted source, and so it makes sense. And it also makes sense to team up with people who have, let's say, complementary just reputations, I suppose, just what they're known for. And so I'm going to be teaming up with Dale Dupree, for example. Dale also works with clients and helps their teams their sales teams get meetings. That's what I do too, but we do it in a very different way. And so the two of us together teaming up for a mastermind makes a lot of sense. So we'll be doing a limited mastermind. I'll be doing a lot more limited masterminds in that same fashion. But here's the thing. Let me step back. There's a framework here. So you mentioned 3 levels of scale. So one is 1-to-1 leverage. The other is multi-channel leverage, and then finally collective scale. And so they're very different. Yeah, and so they're very different approaches to scale. So the first one, as human beings, we are taught to become self-sufficient. I mean, that's a big feature of our upbringing and education is to become independent, to become competent, very competent at something, to compete so that we get good grades, and then from good grades we get into good schools, and we get then a great career, great job opportunities because of that. The problem with that, it's very effective, but the problem with that is it doesn't scale at all. You can't put all that effort in and then you can't scale jobs. You can't have 1,000 jobs. You can't multiply the effect of a job 1,000 times. You just have one job. And so that's interesting. It's useful as a base point, but it's not it's not, you'll never scale that way. And so I just mentioned then creating collaborations with others. And that is, I think that's the quickest way to scale, is to, if you're bootstrapping, is to, that is, in other words, just doing this under your own power. Then yeah, of course, team up. I'm teaming up with a lot of the authors I know and all sorts of other people to do these interesting little ventures together. It could be just very temporary things like a month-long mastermind, something like that, or a weekend strategy summit, something along those lines. But those help you build your business and grow your footprint in terms of the people that you know that can become clients who are already buyers of other or complementary services. And then finally, it's collective scale. It's just this enormous collective of, I'm thinking about weeds, it's just this enormous collective of weeds on a plot of land, on a farm, or in our yards, wherever they are. They don't, I mentioned before, they don't do anything alone. It's always at scale. And so there for us, I think those are where we find the hyper growth startup sorts of companies that are backed by hefty investment and thus able to just, they're not hampered by they're not hampered by a lack of money. They just, and probably connections and other resources. They just absolutely focus on growth, and it's a collective effort to make that company grow at an enormous rate. And of course, we see lots of examples of those kinds of companies, and some of them break through and become just enormous. I just call them enormous patches of weed. I mean, look at Uber, something like Uber. It's just spread around the world very quickly. And Airbnb is another one, all around the world. I don't know if that's a good thing, but it's spread all around the world quickly, almost like these are movements. I mentioned movements before and soil strategy, but they're almost like they're movements. And suddenly people change the way they live and the way they use their properties or the way that they travel. I'm thinking about Airbnb, but actually both of those, and Uber. So so those would be examples of collective scale.
So, Stu, before I let you go, my question to you is, the examples that we shared today mostly are breakthrough businesses. Uber is a breakthrough business. Airbnb is a breakthrough business. So is SpaceX.
Yeah.
SpaceX. Starbucks, I'm not sure whether we can call it a breakthrough business, but still, in its model and how they did it and how they brought that whole concept of expensive coffee. I mean, they literally replaced a 50-cent coffee with a $4 coffee, right?
Yeah.
By giving you the environment and the space and the social sort of atmosphere, whatever you call it. How do you see small businesses and small startups actually benefiting from thinking of business like this?
Well, I think every business at every level benefits from that sort of thinking and needs to think this way, or they're not going to survive. If you don't have unfair advantages, even in your local market, then you're not going to survive. I'll go back to the little village that I live in again. There were a lot of businesses that failed, and then there were some that thrived. So one of them was the pizzeria in town that fortunately thought ahead and collected email addresses of their customers. So, and they quickly changed from a dine-in model to a takeout model. People still had to eat. This is during the pandemic I'm talking about. So people still had to eat, and they turned around. They started just communicating with their base via email. And the other restaurants in town that didn't do that, they sat there without an unfair advantage. I have lots of unfair advantages in my little business. I don't do it a lot so much anymore, but I am one of the Wall Street Journal cartoonists, and every time my cartoons show up in the paper, it's reaching 2.1 million people. I mean, it's a good way to build a brand around something like a cartoon. My signature's in the cartoon. So, but that's useful to me because I use cartoons to help my sales team clients break through to their top accounts, to their top prospects. We use cartoons; they're personalized, and to be able to say, Hi, I'm sending a cartoon to your boss, to, let's say an assistant. Hi, my name is such and such, and I'm calling because I'm sending a print of a cartoon by one of the Wall Street Journal cartoonists, and it's about your boss. Well, we're talking about my work that these teams are using, and that's an unfair advantage. And I'm not a giant company, so, but a lot of unfair advantage. These books that I write, and the fact that I get to come out and talk about things that no one else even knows how to talk about, like weed strategy for business, are unfair advantages. Those are weak. And okay, so now I'm talking about being an author. So I think you get the point. You can create collaborations all over your marketplace. You can create all kinds of things like that that'll help you grow your business. It's not just SpaceX, and I would say Starbucks is or was a breakthrough company. So it's not just SpaceX and Starbucks and so on. Just these huge examples, but these are examples of companies that have grown really literally like a weed. They're great examples of growing like a weed.
Yeah, I think what I am sort of taking away from this conversation is that you need to have a shift in your mindset and look through a very different kind of lens. And there are multiple points where you need to be working your strategy out. I mean, it's not only one dimensional, but it's a multi-dimensional sort of approach, which eventually completes the picture. Uh, it is not just one. We are going to send out more mails, kind of thing, you know.
Yeah, yeah. It literally is that the model that I mentioned. It's not one dimension. It's four in the model. So it's adopting the weed mindset. Read it and do things. There's some really practical advice given in the book about how you do that, about how you let your actions lead your emotions, because our emotions really kind of shut us down. But if you let your actions lead your emotions, I do that in the form of working out almost every day at the gym. So, and I come out feeling completely different and just really charged up. So even if I didn't feel like going, I go, because not feeling like going is an emotional barrier to reaching my goals. And we let our emotions lead us around like that far too easily. So it's taking on that fierce weed mindset and developing unfair advantages and leveraging those two things against collective scale, or at least multi-channel leverage. You want to leverage those things in that manner, and then it's also then reducing it to this is really important. Reducing it, or let's say. Reducing is not the right word, but let's say concentrating it into a process that can be repeated, because then you can train, you can delegate, and you can train, you can sell your business. You can't sell a business that doesn't have a process. So without process, you're not even building a business. So it's those four elements that are key to using weed strategy to grow like a weed.
Bits About Books is brought to you by PitchLink, the buyer-seller engagement platform. PitchLink makes buying easy by enabling high-quality engagement between buyers and sellers through its presentation and discussion modules. Sellers create customized sales narratives using sales collaterals and personal videos, and reach out to prospects through a non-intrusive, buyer-qualified engagement. PitchLink requires no installation or download and holds the entire repository of sales collaterals and buyer-seller conversations. Talk to us to know more about how you can engage with customers without intrusion. Call us on 99021 631 32.
Stu, this was great. Thank you so much. I hope you had a good time chatting about the book again.
Very nice.
I'm sure you've done it numerous times by now.
Well, I love those weeds, and it's my favorite book. So I'm very, very, very excited to get to talk with you about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that, and I'm glad that we could make time and you are here today. I look forward to the next one. Thank you very much.
Thank you as well.
We have a fantastic lineup over the next couple of episodes with great conversations on breakthrough books. Subscribe in your favorite podcast app so you do not miss a single episode. Thanks for listening. Thank you for being with us today on Bits About Books, where we talk to authors about breakthrough books on sales, marketing, and business. We hope this conversation helped inform and motivate as we all navigate a rapidly changing business environment. For us, these are enlightening conversations enriched with knowledge and expertise. We encourage you to go out and buy the book to learn firsthand and implement some of the great ideas we discussed today. We hope to have you with us again in the next exciting episode of Bits About Books. If you liked what you heard, subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast platforms like iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcast from, and give us a rating while you are at it.
This Bizcast original podcast is produced for PitchLink, the next generation buyer-seller engagement platform, where the mission is to make buying easy. Hosted by Subhanjan Sarkar and produced by Rajiv Aditya. See you next time and have a wonderful day.